In this lesson, we will create a shape layer and animate its position properties so that we can introduce the shape to the rest of our composition. Okay, so let's talk about how to create a shape. There's a couple different ways that we can do this. I can either go up through Layer, New, Shape, or I can just start with the Shape tool, which is kind of similar to how we created our text layers. We can either add a new text layer or just jump straight to the text tool. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this way here that we're in the layer menu. So go ahead and just hit Shape Layer, and we see that that will create a new shape layer on our timeline. And now I'm going to come up here to the rectangle tool, and I want to actually create a circle. So if I am not wanting to use that rectangle tool, I can just click and hold, and it's going to drop down all these other options for me. So go ahead and grab the ellipse tool, and that's what we're going to use to create a circle. So usually whenever I'm creating a shape like this, I like to do it just right in the center of my composition. Now you don't have to do it this way, it's just what I prefer. So I'm going to hover my cursor right there over that center point where we see the crosshairs from our title action safe grid, and I will click that and begin to drag out, and you see that that ellipse is being drawn. Now I want mine to be a perfect circle, so I'm going to hold Shift, and you see that now that's constraining that to remain perfectly round. And another thing that I want to do is, instead of it scaling out from that upper left corner, I'm going to hold Control at the same time, and that's going to scale it out in all directions from the center. So let's go ahead and bring this up just about right there. So it's about taking up about a third of this middle area here. And now I want to go in and change the color, and I'm going to change it to that blue color that we used on our millions piece of text. So I can turn back on my swatches layer down here in my timeline by clicking that little eyeball. And now to change the color of a shape, we see that we have these options up here next to our toolbar. So if I click the fill, it's going to give me the same color picker that we used earlier for our text. So just go ahead and grab that eyedropper tool, and I'm going to pick this blue color. So I'll say OK to that. But I also want to add a stroke. And right now, I can't see the stroke because it's so small. So let's go ahead and turn the stroke pixel size up a little bit. So I'm just going to drag that. And right now that's sitting at about 9 pixels. So that looks pretty good. We could crank that up to a 10. So you could just click that and type in a 10 if you wanted to. And what I want to do for the color of this stroke is make it just a little bit more of a dark color than this teal that we're using here. So go ahead and click this white stroke that it's defaulting to, and then we'll color pick the same color that we used for the inside, and then I'm going to just adjust that to be a little bit darker by clicking directly down from where this color is being picked here in the spectrum of colors. So just moving this farther down towards the black is going to give it a much darker teal tint to it. So go ahead and say OK to that. And if I click off just to deselect that, you can see that the outline of this is that new, different, and darker color. And right now, it's not quite at 100% because we're at 50%. So if you zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see how crisp those edges are. And this shape that we're creating inside of After Effects is a vector-based shape. So I can scale this up as big or small as I want to, and it's going to maintain those crisp edges. Okay, so let's scale this back down just about to the same size that we had earlier, and position this back in the middle of our composition. And you can see that I'm using that spacebar shortcut that I showed you earlier to toggle over to that hand tool. And now I want to go ahead and turn off that swatches layer again. So I'm going to come down there and click that eyeball switch. And now I want to set some keyframes so that this circle animates here to the middle as my text is revealing or is exiting off of my screen. So right about here is where I want this circle to hit. So you can see we barely can see that S still at the end of our piece of text, the millions piece of text. So this is where we want to set our position key. That's going to be our final key where this will stop. So to bring up the position key for our shape layer, we could toggle down through that transform menu like we normally do, but there's a little bit faster way to do it, and that's by just simply hitting the P key. So you can see that that is only going to bring up the transform position property, and then I just don't have to look through all those other properties. So it's a good way to keep your timeline a little bit more organized. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit that stopwatch since we already dragged our current time indicator to the place where we want this to stop. It's going to just set that key at that point. And now let's move backwards 12 frames like what we talked about earlier so that our animation is the minimum length of time without looking too fast. So I'm going to hold that shift key and hit the page up key to move backwards 10 frames, and then I'll hit page up 2 more times to bring me backwards those 2 extra frames for 12 frames. And now we can just grab that circle and drag it backwards out of our frame. Now again, I think I want this to be in a perfectly straight line, so let's go ahead and hold shift, and that's just going to force that to move in a perfectly linear way. So now if I scrub this, we see we get this sort of a look. And actually, now that I'm watching this animation, I feel like this could even begin to happen a little bit earlier because my screen starts to look a little bare about this point. So I can select both of those keys and we can move them backwards just a little bit. And then we'll be able to see what that animation looks like if it's happening a little bit sooner. And I think that looks a little bit better. It doesn't look like we have forgotten to add something at that in-between point there. So I like the way that that looks. So in this lesson, we learned how to create a shape layer with a stroke, and we combine this new element with the rest of our images to create a transition in our scene.